this business of controlling the costs and living simply, and that was the secret. How much money? Warren and I had tiny little bits of money. We always underspent our incomes, and we invested, and if you live long enough, you end up rich. It's not very complicated. And now there is a part of life which is, how do you scramble out of your mistakes without them costing too much? And we've done some of that too. And if you look at Berkshire Hathaway, think of its founding businesses: a doomed department store, a doomed New England textile company, and a doomed trading stamp company. Out of that came Berkshire Hathaway. Now, we handled those losing hands pretty well, and we bought into them very cheaply. But of course, the success came from changing our ways and getting into the better businesses. And it isn't that we were so good at doing things that were difficult. We were good at avoiding things that were difficult, finding things that are easy. By the way, when we bought the Daily Journal, that was easy. And what we're doing now in this software business is difficult. But due to the accident of these good associations and the fact that these old colleagues have lived so long, we're doing pretty well in the new business. It has potential. And it's fun to do. And how many declining newspapers have hundreds of millions of marketable securities lying around and a new business with some promise? We're like the last of the Mohicans.
It's for Jerry.
Oh. The other great secret is that we're good at lifelong learning. Warren is so much better in some ways in his 70s and 80s than he was younger that it's almost awesome. If you keep learning all the time, you have a huge advantage. And we both just like it.
And we have a wonderful group of friends. Really wonderful.
From whom we can learn a lot.
Yeah.
One of these guys at the Berkshire meeting from one of the foreign publications said, why do a couple of guys in a little place in Omaha do so much better than all these powerful minds in great institutions? And I said, well, I think Warren and I know the edge of our competency better than other people do. And that's humility in the Tumbrello sense, and that is a very important thing to know. I say over and over again, it's not a competency if you don't know the edge of it. You are a disaster if you don't know the edge of your own competency. Warren frequently says, I'd rather deal with a guy with an IQ of 130 who thinks it's 125 than a guy with an IQ of 180 that thinks it's 200. That second guy will kill you. And so it is very important to know the edge of your own competency. Warren and I have not made our way in life by making successful macroeconomic predictions and betting on our conclusions. Our system is to swim as competently as we can, and sometimes the tide will be with us and sometimes it will be against us. But by and large, we don't much bother with trying to predict the tides because we plan to play the game for a long time. I recommend to all of you exactly the same attitude. It's kind of a snare and a delusion to outguess macroeconomic cycles. Very few people do it successfully, and some of them do it by accident. When the game is that tough, why not adopt the other system of swimming as competently as you can and figuring that over a long life you'll have your share of good tides and bad tides. I think you can count on more booms and busts over your remaining lifetime. How big and with what cyclicality, I can't tell you. I can tell you the best way of coping, which is just to put your head down and behave creditably every day. And I will say something about life generally. I was very lucky in that I had an ancestor that I never met. My mother's grandfather was a pioneer. He came out to Iowa and he lived in a sod house with his young wife. That's a cave through 2 winters. And he literally was a pioneer from nothing. And he rose finally to where he controlled the leading bank in the town and was a very reputable citizen and a very charitable man. He joined Andrew Carnegie and gave the town library to Algona. My grandfather made him do it, my great-grandmother. He never would have done it by himself. And he made him put his giant tarpon in the library as part of the gift. So always amused me to go by that library and see this giant tarpon. So the eccentrics come naturally in my family. But at any rate, having wrested this success from hardship and danger and trouble, and he was a captain in the Black Hawk Wars. I mean, he was literally a soldier and part of this. He had this theory, looking back at his long life, with this unusual success. And he owned a bunch of farms at the end that he leased to Germans. Well, you couldn't lose money leasing a farm to a German in Iowa. Naturally, he was successful. But what he said over and over again to his grandchildren, including my mother, was the real opportunities that come to you are few. It's a very fortunate life that is just bathed in opportunity all the way. Most people just get a few times when they can make a huge difference by seizing a huge activity. And he said, when you find one, my dear grandchildren, and you can clearly recognize it, he says, seize it boldly and don't do it small. And my mother, who wasn't interested in finance, but liked to talk the family, she liked to transmit the family quirks. But of course, this guy was my soulmate. The great-grandfather I never knew. And of course, I totally adopted his point of view. And I must say it has worked wonderfully. And so I quit claim my great-grandfather Ingham's rule to you. Assume that your really major opportunities in life are going to be few. And when you get a Lollapalooza, for God's sakes, don't hang by like a timid little rabbit. Don't hang back. They aren't that many of the really big good ones. If you take the whole history of Berkshire Hathaway, if you take out the 20 best transactions, our record is a joke. Well, 20 best transactions over 40-some years, that's one every 2 years. And we work at it all the time. Life is not just bathing you in unlimited opportunities, even if you work at being able to find them and seize them.
As you look back on your life experience, what's the most important piece of advice that you would offer everyone in the room tonight as they look forward into their futures?
Well, there are a few obvious ones. They're all ancient. Ben Franklin, marriage is like the most important decision you have, not your business career. It'll do more for you, good or bad, than anything else. And Ben Franklin had the best advice ever given on marriage. He said, keep your eyes wide open before marriage and half shut thereafter. It's amazing how if you just get up every morning and keep plugging and have some discipline and keep learning, and it's amazing how it works out okay. And I don't think it's wise to have an ambition to be president of the United States or a billionaire or something like that, because the odds are too much against you. Much better to aim low. I did not intend to get rich. I wanted to get independent. I just overshot. And and by the way, while you're clapping, some of the overshooting was accidental. There's a big, you can be very deserving and very intelligent and very disciplined, but there's also a factor of luck that comes into this thing. And the people who get the outcomes that seem extraordinary, they're the people who have discipline and intelligence and good virtue, plus a hell of a lot of luck. Why wouldn't the world work like that? So you shouldn't give credit for the unusual a lot of the people, a friend of mine said about a colleague of his in his fraternity, he says, old George was a duck sitting on a pond and they raised the level of the pond. There are a lot of people that just luck into the right place and rise, and there are a lot of very eminent people who have many advantages, and they've got one little flaw or one bit of bad luck, and they're mired in misery all their lives. But that makes it interesting to have all this variation.